Okay.
And I'm glad John made it and Anthony. So we did have about 8 people signed up that registered for this meeting.
Okay, well, maybe we should just kind of check in with one another and see what's happening.
Mhm.
And give us a barometer reading of what's going on with you, and we'll take it from there. So who wants to go first?
John will.
Oh, okay, John, you've been.
Oh, well, good, excellent. Very busy week. Finishing off a project which launches on World Homeless Day, dealing with the homeless, which are called over here for this project's purposes Kiowa. The translation of Kiowa is to wander. And so rather than being a term which is pejorative, like homelessness, like you have a loss, this actually is an active agency in itself in the word, in my view. But it's an extraordinary journey. I'll just give you one example because it's just been so profound. There's a gentleman who's been living in his car for 10 years in the wilderness, and for the first time has invited people to visit him and has spoken. So there's an extraordinary background of trust that has had to be built. The process of doing the photography is very much secondary to the journey of the Kiowa, finding confidence enough through their various perspectives to share their stories. So that's me, and continuing to be me for the next 3 or 4 weeks, actually. 3 weeks.
Wow, it's incredible, John. I don't know if you knew, but the charter had run 6 or 7 sessions on the human rights and homelessness or houselessness. And they're all archived. They were really wonderful because each one featured a different approach to working in community and community building. And there was a wonderful program done with a group that started in Chile, Techo, and is really through, I think, Latin America into Mexico. And the woman who is in charge of the Mexican program did the last of our series. And I think that we're going to be thinking about how can we do this again, but continue to archive the material and to make it available to people around the world so that they can think of ways that they might be able to replicate some of the projects and approaches that are being done.
Oh, that's great. And I think this dovetails because it is essentially something, being World Homeless Day, that can be shared via other, if it's of interest to the Charter.
Oh, yeah.
What I like about it is that dipping behind the label, each person has their own individual story and journey, whether that be arriving through economic, kind of loss, mental health, trauma, addiction. They're all, how homelessness is merely a symptom.
Yeah.
Mm.
In fact, just a sideline to what you're doing. I'm reminded that our most read articles of people who come to the Charter are around small houses, homelessness, and so and I'm almost guessing that a lot of those people access the Charter at local free access to internet, like libraries and things, and just put in these words and they wind up on our website.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, there is the guy, Anthony, who nominated that you would be first to go. So I think we should make him second.
Yes.
I thought Kendra could step
I
in.
knew you were going to do that, but it's not going to work.
I don't mind, whatever.
You go.
A range of things, I guess, we're on. There's a group of us at the mosque who are involved in kind of monitoring and looking at the Royal Commission report, which was the Royal Commission of Inquiry that came out after the mosque attacks, and looking at that, because there's a kind of a delicious mischief in governments sometimes, because the announcement was the heading of the announcement from the Prime Minister the end of 2020 was government accepts all recommendations, and 44 recommendations came out of the Royal Commission. But then you read the first sentence and it says the government has in principle accepted, and that's a lovely little word, in principle. It means yeah, whatever it means. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Marita. We accept your application. In principle, we've accepted this, but but don't go out and buy a coffee yet. So that's one thing we're looking at. But more on the more positive side, we're busy on 19th of October. We got hopefully a student co-created conversation, and the invitation has gone out to schools, to all high schools across Christchurch. The theme will be taking the Maori word Turangi Waiwai, which means in a sense a place to stand. We're taking it as the notion of belonging. So that becomes it. We step back from it, hopefully, that's the intention. And the students themselves run it and have hopefully challenging conversations in a safe space. And what we're hoping is that we can take this forward. This follows on from what we started last year. But we hope we can take this forward and build on this big, I'm saying hope, and hope is the operative word time and again, that the need to have hope and to offer the possibility of hope in a strange time. So that's one of the things. I sent you a little link to the launch here in Christchurch of the peace train. At Stevens Yusuf Islam's
Right.
little chugger, he called it, his little gift to the city. And it's just a bright thing.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And
Gorgeous.
it's gorgeous colors. John was there doing a lot of filming on the day. It'll run just on the first and third Sunday of each month, because sometimes gifts that come from people are actually kind of a bit of a liability because the logistics of running the thing and everything. So that's something we're hoping to build on that, so that it could be taken to schools, where schools could arrange a peace-related thing around it. It's not. We tried to get clearance from the sort of Land Transport Authority that it could run around part of Christchurch, but it's not set up for road use, so it doesn't comply with the full requirements for on the road use. But if we can take it to a school premises where there's good asphalted surface, and they can set up a function around it. So these are all exploratory times, and it's sort of quirky because you say, well, what's that got to do with it? But it gives people a little bit of joy, and joy is no bad place to start. The possibility of joy. There's a lovely poem. I'll do it again, John. Sorry about this, John. Quotation time. A guy called John Clare, who was listed as a peasant poet, lived at the end of the 18th, beginning, and lived for the 18th and 19th centuries. And he had a poem there, and he said, "Had I known as then joy had left the paths of men, I'd have wooed her like a lover." So the idea that the importance of having joy in your life is there. So there was other stuff that we're involved with. I can't remember what it is at the moment. That'll do as a kickoff. Yeah.
Okay. Kendra, if you don't mind, I just have a few thoughts in relation to
That's
what
fine. Go.
Anthony was talking about.
Sure.
And I don't know if you would be interested, Kendra and John, but Anthony, I am going to ask you, please, and I know that you can't attend because it's at 7:30 in the morning tomorrow. We have an EdNet forum, and it is on youth collaborating for compassion. And so I want you to register so you can get that recording. And the background to this is the last year we've been working, I think it's over a year, on trying to bring together a youth program. And on this past Sunday and Monday, we actually had a process called open space technology. And we had 178 youth who registered, participated initially. And the way that open space, I don't know if people know how it works, but
We've done a couple of exercises with
Yeah.
open space.
well, that we had the themes that people wanted to talk about. And so, 178 people, 33 or 36 themes. However, 120 plus people went into one theme, and that was health, stress, anxiety. And there was another one on fear. I was in that one. It's all, with open space. Hopefully it's the youth who are talking. And the sessions were just 2 hours each of those days. We are going to be listening to some of the things that we've been doing tomorrow with our youth collaborating for compassion. But we feel like a heavy, heavy burden of responsibility now that we have, at least 120 people around the world who want to explore this topic. And we're definitely going to do it. But the other thing is that you might remember the map that we shared the last time. We want all of these youth to get on that map so that they can be connecting with one another. So that if we could, the project that you're doing in New Zealand, both with youth and then John with houselessness, if we could get people on there so that, they can be identifying one another, they can really make their own connections, but especially youth to be able to make connections with others in their age group, I think it's really so important. And we need more diversity because the majority of our youth are from South Asia. And, trying to pick up obviously people from the United States as well as Australia. I didn't want to bring it up at the previous meeting I was at with the Australia folks because they're a little tense right now because they are doing their deep listening program next week, and they've interviewed like 40 people, and it's going to be like 8 hours of presentations and stuff. But we will try and bring in as many youth from all over the world as we can. And I hope that your groups would consider to come aboard. So one of the first ways of doing that is just finding out a little bit more and then, giving it into the hands of youth in New Zealand to see what the next steps would be.
When you said 7:30, is that 7:30 your time or
Yeah, it is.
7:30 in the morning your time?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is I think that if you just register, we'll make certain you get the recording, because I don't know what time that is for you. But it's like, well, what would it be? Would it be
What are you
like,
talking about? You're talking
like
7:30 Pacific time or?
yeah, 7:30?
Pacific time.
Yeah,
What's the time for you now,
right
now,
now it's 3:45 Pacific time.
in the afternoon? Yeah.
Yeah, in the afternoon, and
So
we're Wednesday right now.
We're
So-
5 hours earlier, I think it is from memory, something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever that time would be.
But, take a look, and then, if you can make it, that would be fantastic. But if you can't, we'll get you the recording. And then we'll find a time where, people who are involved in this can come together. And that time is no time, because this with India is like almost, we have to meet with India at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning in order to make it right for them.
Oh, wow.
Well for you. So, and like tonight, I have a meeting starting at 11 p.m. for me. And that's the closest way that group, the coalition, Compassion Coalition, can meet. So, the world clock is not friendly. But
It's
the
about
other
3:30 in the morning, so I probably won't do that, but there
I
you go.
think you won't. But one other thing, and this is just an encouragement, the Charter Board of Trustees hopefully will be passing our new bylaws, which means that 25% of our Board of Trustees must be youth between 18 and 35. So if there is someone or more that you can think of that would be a great Charter for Compassion Board of Trustee member, we'd love for you to let us know so that we can put their name in. But I didn't want to forget those two things. So. Okay, Kendra, what's happening?
Okay, well, that triggers a few things for me, even just, I'll pick up from there if that's okay. So,
Oh, yeah.
now, Mike, haere mai to everyone. It's Maori Language Week this week, so we're trying to just, keep slipping in our te reo wherever little moments that we can. So it's nice to be able to kōrero with you. Kōrero means just speak and talk and be together. So tonight, actually, our community group is hosting with a bunch of young people an election, a mayoral candidacy only, because there's too many otherwise, because we've got local body elections coming up soon, and we decided to partner with the young people as a way to encourage youth vote, and also to get a sense of whether they and how we can support lowering the vote. We really believe in the lowering of the vote. If we can get kids voting in local body elections at 16 when they're at school, because many of them are really interested and connected to them. But when they leave school at 18 and 19, they're kind of just too busy studying, working, finding a flat, finding a partner. And it just sort of goes off their radar. So I think that whole idea of getting them connected to the sort of civics education kind of stuff around elections. I'm just going to shut the door, sorry. Then that would be a good thing. I've also, now in Nelson here, we've got a youth workers collective. So I'll get the link out to the youth workers collective, because there's a lot of agencies in Nelson that are kind of connected around that. So that's a nice segue in from your mention. Thanks, Marilyn.
We also have two booklets that we could make certain that you receive. But we have a page on the website for the Youth Collaborating for Compassion. And so if, I think Merida will put that up eventually here, so that you might be able to, share that link with people as well.
Cool, thank you. Going back to the housing thing, I don't know if I spoke about that last time, is that myself and two other women have set up a little trust called Home Share for Her, which is, I guess the vision of it was that older women who are still, own a home and are living perhaps on their own if partners have left or died, then instead of feeling under pressure to downsize or to go to a retirement home, or don't want to go to those sorts of models and want to stay in their home as long as they can, we had a vision of, a younger woman, maybe even a mum, with one or two children, could possibly, could find a sort of a matching service. What's interesting at the moment, it's very early days, we've only had it going about 3 months, is that we've got about 50 registered, but a lot of the women who are registering their homes are in fact much younger and still working, and are under pressure to now pay the mortgage because interest rates have gone up.
Uh-huh.
And then the women who are needing homes are often much higher needs and possibly are chronically unwell and are finding it difficult to maintain homes. So, we're finding a bit of this going on at the moment rather than this, but it's an interesting concept. We're really keen to keep working with it, linking to our aged care kind of places, or, like Age Concern, who are keen to keep people in their homes as long as possible. We did have the vision that we might be able to, once we kind of found a model that was really working, that we could then transplant it in other places around the country. So as I say, it's still early days. There's a lot of pressure in New Zealand around housing. Yeah. So I'm really grateful. Thank you, Merida, for sending me the link, because I'd looked on the website and kind of couldn't find it. So I'm really keen to listen to the webinar series and kind of get engaged there. And along that note, also, I just went to a small celebration a couple of days ago. Back in 2005, I was involved with setting up a housing trust here. I was the chair at the founding chair. And one of the sort of streams of work, other than raising funds and trying to get to build homes, which we've gone on to do, was to also link with the government about warming up really old, cold homes. And we got a project going then called Healthier Homes. And we had a vision initially of just doing 30 or 40 houses with some philanthropic funding, a little bit of money from the government and the council. Anyway, it kind of came and went. And it's now become a much bigger project in the last maybe 10 years. And it's called Warmer, Healthier Homes. And they've just celebrated 3,000 homes fully insulated for free to all the families. So that was fantastic.
It's spectacular. Well done. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's a really lovely partnership project of government funding from the Energy Efficiency Commission, and then the DHB, because the statistics that Philippa Howden-Chapman from Otago University has got. There's a map that just completely blew my mind all those years ago, which is that if you look at the winter and summer temperatures and the variations and how the map goes, and then you link especially children or unwell people with respiratory disorders, the admissions to hospital during that time completely, it's a simple map, but it just is completely correlated. So as a way to reduce hospital admissions and people suffering from especially respiratory disorders and from the older, colder homes. Yeah, so that's great. So 3,000 is a good start for the first.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But it's free, which is wonderful. It's a completely free service. And it's like targeting those with the chronically unwell conditions. And it's been a fabulous project. And I felt really touched because I haven't been involved with it for at least 10 years. And it's kind of, as I said, gone through some different iterations. But they were just invited me to come back on and be a trustee. And I said, oh, look, it's just something I can't say no to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. Oh, there's just lots going on. Through my link or my ongoing work with our trust called Inspiring Communities, I put a message out amongst our team about just after our last call, and there's a couple of people on there who were hoping to come today but are both working, so they may in fact find a way to get into this little link or get signed up. I'm not sure whether they have yet, so I'll report back to them tomorrow and let them know.
Well, there are a few more people who registered who haven't come, so maybe they're the ones.
Yeah.
But your sharing reminds me of a couple things. One is a program in Chicago, Illinois, in the States, and it is started by a hospital, and in a really poor neighborhood in the city, but it's a hospital associated with the University of Chicago. And the emergency room, noticed how many people were repeaters to coming in needing help, and then they started to generate cost figures. And they went to both the University of Chicago, the Hospital Association, and to the city and said, look, why don't we give homes to people, pay the rent? It would be far cheaper to pay a year's worth of rent.
Yep.
Because the average cost for admitting people who were houseless was, I think, $86,000.
Wow.
And so therefore, if they could pay $2,000 a month, to get these people housing through a city grant, then there by itself was like a 50% savings. So that was one thing that just, I just had a recollection of that. But I also wanted to say that there's a program in the Netherlands that is really very much being promoted. And that is that, young university people are getting homes with people who are elderly, And, it seems to be working out really, really well. And then the third thing I just was reminded of as you were talking was the very fact, and I think this goes for everyone, is there was a woman from Vanity Fair magazine, and I don't know much about Vanity Fair magazine, except that it's a fashion thing and
Yep,
has a zillion and a half ads in it.
yes.
And she was like, she reminded me of somebody who was 15 years old, but she was one of the feature editors. And this was just 3 days ago. And she was talking about the trend of younger people who are in their like late teens, early 20s, who really want to be associated with, mentored by people who are more seasoned, people who are in their 60s and 70s. And that, and I know the reason that she was on was, they were naming people that really read the magazine who are most interested in Queen Elizabeth, Angela Merkel, people who, have lived an incredible exemplar life in some cases, had extreme ruts that they got themselves into and managed to get themselves out of. So, just, something to think about. And as we have these conversations, the need, I think, for intergenerational conversations.
Mm, mm.
Have you got ideas, Kendra, about what the sort of arrangement between the people will be? Will it be a tenancy, or what will they do?
The home share. No, we
Yeah.
decided to go down the trail of a boarding house agreement. So we've actually established a whole lot of, the protocols, and so
Yeah.
it actually helps a homeowner and a home sharer to find, it's like a social agreement as much as a financial and legal agreement. So it's not a tenancy as such, so it doesn't kind of come under the bond thing and all that stuff, but it's got some really tight protocols. We've had lawyers overlook them and make sure that they're all, consistent, but trying to make it as easy as possible, because a lot of older women especially, kind of go, I don't want to go to Trade Me and find someone. It's not a rental, it's actually about a relationship first. And
absolutely,
seeing how they might match. So
and it could be so good, but it could also go really bad.
Exactly. It's complex because of people, and we've got really, so our point of difference is that we've raised funds for a facilitator. So we were hoping that we would have mostly a kind of web-based kind of matching service, but the people who've set up our website really didn't kind of get, they just got a dating script, and it doesn't feel right. And so we're sort of stuck a bit at the moment. And then we thought, then if someone felt like they needed, and so the forms would be available on the website, and that people could find one another really through that, but that they could have someone to talk to, a facilitator, if they needed some more support to explain the stuff, or give them ways to do it. So at the moment it feels like the facilitators are doing a lot more brokerage than, and they keep missing at the moment, and so we haven't actually had a fully successful match yet. Some people have tried, and they went and stayed with someone for a couple of weeks or something, and then or have had many conversations. So there's a few looking possible, and then they haven't quite worked. So we're still in that process, but having a facilitator, we felt like, was the point of difference, because there's quite a few models of this either in America or in Australia, and so we were kind of trying to shape something that felt like it fitted a bit more for us.
I did see sorry,
go on.
Go ahead, Rip.
Go ahead.
Me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I did see on TV, I caught half a program of a young person and older person model. I think that the way that you were saying about the university students, Marilyn, and I guess because they would be thinking short term, that kind of is a different situation, because they're in a stage of their life where they'd be looking for something for a set amount of time. But yeah, I had a friend who was widowed, and she was walking around her cul-de-sac thinking how many of the people there in quite big houses were actually by themselves.
Yes.
And I don't think she ever did anything about it, but she was thinking of a model where people might share you know, a really big house.
Yes.
So they would have a, you know, she was into dancing. So she was thinking of a house with a ballroom, you know, so that you could use a really big room for a large family gathering, or if you were into dancing or whatever. And you could use the fully equipped kitchen if you were into that, but you would
Exactly.
also have your own space and maybe day-to-day sort of facilities. But that would be more a partnership agreement kind of thing, I think. But it was a different way of sharing and having those day-to-day connections with people that you might be missing if you're living by yourself.
And that was the original vision of it. Is that we'd heard and we know many older women who are living on their own in quite big houses that are just not ready to move, but A, finding the financial pressure, and B, feeling a bit isolated. So
Yeah,
you know, we'll stick with the work. Just picking up before I finish, Marilyn, a thing about the Chicago and the hospital and the year's worth of rent. I just facilitated a workshop here last week with my Inspiring Communities work with Kāinga Ora. So Kāinga Ora is kind of like our government housing body, public housing stuff, and they've undergone a massive sort of transformation really of A, building more homes, but B, they've actually employed community developers and community people who are actually really understanding how to kind of look after their tenants in a much more compassionate way. Anyway, which is great. So I was there doing some stuff about community-led development and trying to get some ideas with them about the ways in which they could get the tenants engaged with one another and build a sense of community within any of those little neighborhoods. And they come up with all sorts of amazing creative ideas, but one of them was a bit radical, and I wanted to share it with you guys, and John and Anthony and Pip, you might be interested in this one. One of the senior managers said, I think one of the best ideas that we could have is to advocate to the government that they actually just give them the housing. She said it's a complete financial merry-go-round. The government gives the tenants money because they're on benefits, they're unwell, you know, got condition, whatever, or subsidises their housing, and then all of that money goes back to the government because it's public housing. And she said, wouldn't it make a difference if we said, if you go into a state house, that you just, it's free to rent, you have to still find your living expenses, but I mean, wouldn't that stop a huge amount of flapping about with all the benefit system that they have? So I'm going to pick up, I mean, I didn't do it in the workshop, it wasn't appropriate, but I'm going to pick up with that woman and see if we can, you know, take that idea somewhere, because I think it's an absolutely stunning idea. And she's in it.
Stunning, but it would be pretty hard on all those people who are saving their pennies. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people who are working so incredibly hard to get a deposit together.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, it makes sense, but then on the other hand, yeah.
Oh yeah, there's lots of ifs and buts, but it is a big merry-go-round of money, and a lot of time and energy is spent by all the people trying to figure out all the different machinations of that money as it kind of comes in and then goes back. Yeah. Anyway, that's me.
Can I throw? Sorry, Pip, because it's your turn here. Can I just throw in a tiny little thing, completely different? But New York Times has a great article today about the guy who founded Patagonia. The clothing thing, and he's simply given, it's worth $3 billion, and he's simply given away the company, full stop, given it away. What? He said to use the expression, excuse the expression, he said, I was really pissed off when I saw myself on the Forbes list. It wasn't a place I wanted to be. And and the company's worth something like 100 million a year. And all that money now is to go to combat climate change and protect an undeveloped land around the globe. I thought a brilliant way for money to go. But sorry, okay, carry on.
Wow.
That's absolutely.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Wow.
I just wanted to point out, I put it in the chat, that one of the things that the charter's involved in are circles of trust. And it's a concept that was founded by Parker Palmer. His work has been taken up by a group called the Center for Courage and Renewal. And, I was just thinking as you were talking, that, you know, the idea of just letting people come together and almost like as the Quakers did, just in silence initially, maybe, that, you know, and it's amazing because I do circles of trust with our board of trustees. God knows that we need to do that. And we do it every few months, and we don't have an agenda. And we just come together, and ironically, you know, we can fill up a couple hours. And we get to know people at a deeper level, and issues that we didn't know that people had come up. And to a certain extent, something like that happened today with, earlier today with a meeting that we had with Compassionate Atlanta. And there was a board member and two directors, there were a couple other people, but one of the co-directors started to talk about her background, where she lived now, in the Georgia, the Atlanta area. And the board member said, "Oh, thank you for that. I never knew that about you." And they had been together for 10 years.
Mm.
So, you know, I think with, you know, as you're working with people, and I think it does take time. I mean, you can throw them into the same housing unit as an experiment or something, or you could use the time where they can just talk with one another and find out exactly, you know, what their levels of concern are, their levels of passion, and you know, the talking could be the bridge to what the decision making in the future might be. So I would really,
That's wonderful. Thank you.
and
Parker Palmer's an inspiration all his own, isn't he? And I remember him from years ago when I was a young teacher reading something that he'd written, and how amazing. So thank you. I'm going to follow that link for sure.
yeah, and we do have material that we use, that are just kind of the guardrails for having a circle of trust, that you might really be interested in. So
Thank you.
I'll find them and send them on. So sorry, Rip. For a
Really
while,
good.
I didn't even know you were here because you were off my radar on the sidebar. But welcome, and so we're just kind of checking in with one another. So you're next.
Sorry, is that me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, right. Hi. Yes, I'm sorry I was late. My computer was playing up and refusing to join.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it
So,
does.
hello, everybody. I guess the thing that I've been involved in that's most community-based is our community garden that's up and running and looking good. We had a church hall at our church that had to come down because it was cracking. And just at the same time, Sustainable Taranaki, we're looking for a site for a community garden. So that's gone in. And it's just amazing how it's come together so quickly. It's really good, and plans for more. So yeah, that's kind of probably the thing I've been most involved with recently.
Rip, can you tell us where you're from? I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Taranaki, so that's West Coast, North Island.
Okay.
Taranaki is the mountain there, and
Mhm.
I'm south of that about an hour. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was just thinking of Belfast, for example. Compassionate Belfast, one of the things that they did was to build a garden, a community garden, and put a few benches in. And I don't know, most people don't realize that Belfast still has a curfew with some neighborhoods, if you can believe it, keeping Protestants and Catholics safely behind gates. And so gardens are really wonderful places. And the
Sure.
other thing that that Belfast has done has been having meetings across the city in coffee houses, so that people have to travel from one end of the city to the other to meet up. But to a certain extent, it's kind of like what Parker Palmer is talking about, to develop these circles of conversation and eventually circles of trust. So a community garden is just the way to go.
Yeah, no, it's looking good. And we're currently strengthening our church, but when that work's been done, there'll be a contemplation garden next to it
Mhm.
that the church people are doing on that part, and that will kind of spread over in, and there will be seating places, and I'm hoping that we'll make a willow house for the children to
Yeah,
play in, and yeah, no, I think it's looking good.
it just reminds me, I think this tradition started in France. It's white table or white, supper. And we have it in our area, and like in a neighborhood, you can, shut off the ends of the street. Everyone brings out tables. They dress in white if they can. Tablecloths are white. They cook for one another, and they
nice.
enjoy a meal together. And it just seems like your community garden would be ideal for doing something like that. And I think this started in Paris. I don't know, maybe in a suburb, and it's caught on globally. And when our Compassionate Colombo in Sri Lanka started up, they launched their evening with the white dinner assembly, and it was just beautiful. We have pictures of that somewhere on our website, but that just reminded me of the possibility. So I'm guessing community garden means raising vegetables.
Yes, we've planted flowers as well, so it's going to look quite pretty. But yeah, it's mostly vegetables, and so we've been talking a little bit about where the vegetables are going, and the food bank and Kai Kitchen are two of the places. But we're also one of the schools associated with the garden, because we've got 2 or 3 schools visiting, is going to build a pantry to put on the fence line, so that when things are ready to be eaten, we can put them in there, and people will be able to help themselves from there. So yeah, I'm having a few conversations around, aren't you expecting it to be, vandalized or all the stuff stolen or whatever? But you just hope that it won't be. So it's looking so lovely. People would have to be pretty sort of, I can't think why anybody would vandalize it, because it looks so nice, and we're involving people from such a wide range of ages and across the community. And I think that having the pantry will actually help, that people can take what's ready and hopefully leave what's not ready.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I live on this road in this small community, and honestly, I haven't bought vegetables in weeks, because people just put out what they want to share, and everyone knows that you just take it.
Right.
Because it's there for the taking. And one other thing for students, one of our compassionate schools in a suburb outside of Delhi learned about the refrigerator project that was happening in Turkey. And what they did was they convinced, and it was the students who convinced the school administration to get one refrigerator to start out with. And they worked with the janitorial staff. They rigged it up so that it worked as a refrigerator. They took the food that they didn't eat during the lunchtime, and then put it in the refrigerator, and the refrigerator was open for 3 hours every day, and anyone who needed that food. And so now that one little refrigerator has multiplied to 4 corners of the school grounds. And so it's also a wonderful thing. And I was thinking about Alice Waters. I don't know if people know her, famous chef, and she has a lot of gardening programs with children and how to involve them. So thanks.
Yeah, it actually works reasonably well here in Christchurch. There are a number of little corner suburban street pantries that popped up, mainly after the earthquakes, land disruption and so forth. Simple things like, I know of one guy just runs one outside his house, and he simply made it a beeline to the local bakery and said, "Can I have all your bread, that isn't sold?" And every couple of days, that bread's put in his pantry and other pantries, and it's just such a simple thing. And it strikes me that when you go to a place that provides food, dinner for you, if running food programs, that's wonderful. But so often for people is a sense of be grateful, we're giving you something, whereas the community sharing aspect,
Yeah.
I'm not putting that terribly clearly, but it's something, it can feel as so there's something about the sharing aspect of taking with no one there. It's just there. This is yours, have it. It's sometimes
Yeah.
a lot easier for people.
I liked the idea of that restaurant in Auckland that I heard about where
Yes.
they were cooking, I think, food that was over, and people paid what they
Yeah.
wanted to pay, what they could afford. So it wasn't just people who really needed a meal, it was anybody could go, and it was nice food. And if you were, accustomed to going to restaurants, then you would pay what you would normally pay. And if actually you didn't have a bean, then you didn't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
So
There used to be a sort of
it's the same
tradition.
sort of idea.
Sorry.
No, I finished.
In Southeast Asia, I spent a lot of time in Singapore, but the tradition amongst the Chinese community was if you went to the sensei, the doctor, you gave a red packet, and if you had no money, it was an empty red packet. But it was a red packet. And a friend of mine whose mother was a Chinese friend of mine, very, very hardworking midwife, used to go out to the villages, as used to exist there and in southern Malaysia, delivering babies, and she'd sort of count up 5 of those and 10 of those and 10 of those. Okay, all good, and then see the new mother in tears, and she said, "Why are you crying? The child is well." And the mother says, "I have nothing to give you." And she said, "It doesn't matter." And then some time later, some months later, she'd go along and there'd be a couple of chickens, people just giving what they could. Can I go over another one of my Tony Green tangents? Sorry about this, but you mentioned Atlanta, Georgia, and I've got to check on that's the right location. Sorry about that. I do this all the time. I used to teach like this. It was havoc in the classroom. John knows this very, very well. We had a lady, Ariana, came here. I may have mentioned this before. She at that time was a playwriting student at Juilliard. And she came here and she interviewed a whole range of people who were deeply affected by the mosque shootings, and those texts that she just let the recorder roll. Those recordings were transcribed, and that's been turned into a verbatim drama with 5 speaking voices. And at each iteration, the new text has been given back to all those 5 and say, "Are you comfortable with this? Do you want anything removed? Do you want anything added?" So they are co-creators, and it's not the Hollywood appropriation of a story, but it's co-creators in their own story. That's been crafted into a play called Memorial. It's been put on at the Guardia Performing Arts Centre in Queens. It's a very brief run there. It's had a play, a small production with NYU Tisch School, reading between there and Beirut, and they've got a play reading in, I think it's Atlanta, Georgia, early next year. So I might want to get in touch with you. I'll confirm that, to get in touch with the people in Atlanta, because what happened with that is 3 examples. In the recent production, a lady who had lost her mother to cancer, who was a stage manager, she was touched by this because it spoke to her. A couple from Salt Lake City came across, they'd lost their son to suicide, and they could hear that grief and people coping with loss. And in the recent production, somebody was from Buffalo, and when NYU put it up on the website, he said, "Can you keep it longer? Because the people in Buffalo can understand this, relate to it directly." So it's about listening to loss and how people cope with loss. But I'll keep you informed of that.
No, please. I know the people in Atlanta would really want to get involved with that. So thank you. And Merida just put up, Merida, you can explain if you want what you just put up in the chat.
This is another of those wonderful projects where people help each other. And these community dinners actually started out in Nelsonville, Ohio. And it was just one woman who noticed that the kids were around on the streets all night. or at least at the beginning of the night. So that meant they weren't having dinner with anybody else. And so she started to invite them, and maybe she invited 5 to the first dinner, and they really loved it. So they asked if they could invite somebody else for the next dinner. And so eventually it ended up being 350 people having dinner on Thursdays, all bringing whatever they could bring, or people would meet her in the supermarket and say, hey, here's some stuff for your next dinner. So there's plenty of ways to help out in that way. That's a
Yeah.
really nice idea as well.
It was reminding me, of all of these wonderful videos that you see on kindness, which is kindness is a compassionate act, the result. And, once it starts, it just snowballs. Last Saturday, I always, on Saturday, we go and we go through a drive-in. We have a very small community here of 2,400 people. And we go and get a coffee and bagel. And, we don't even place our order anymore. They see the car and they have it ready. And we came up and we're ready to pay, and they said, no, people in front of us paid for you. And it was like, wow, and so that kind of, says to you, you want to do something nice for somebody else, that day. And when you have a community garden, wow, and that's really great. Or any of the projects that you're working on. I mean, the community spirit is there.
Yeah. Here
That
in
is that
Monterey,
way
there's also a project about giving a free coffee to a policeman. So you can go to
Yes.
the local store and you can just leave the coffee page. So if a policeman happens to go, they can have coffee. And that's also nice because they are actually, at least in this area, tend to be quite good people.
Yeah, we had that spontaneously happening in a cafe that's just down near the fire station here in Nelson, and because we've just had a big sort of flood event and quite a few houses have been completely destroyed and all the rest. And one of the local cafes said, any of the recovery workers, firemen, policemen, whatever, you'll get a free coffee wherever you come. And they were promoting themselves. It's just lovely. People mostly, happy to be supportive, sort of like they pay it forward. You remember seeing that movie all those years ago? It's just lovely. Yeah.
And some cafes I've heard of will have, coffees on the wall or somewhere where, you can pay for one and they'll put a mark somewhere, and then somebody can come and ask for one off the wall if they need to.
Oh, nice. I just love the sense of enormous creativity that, that just is in communities, whether it's around food. I mean, we've done lots or seen huge numbers of projects all over the country because food's become so expensive here. And it's just an endless creativity about the way people support each other and trying to reduce it.
So John, I think you were going to say something.
Oh, you're very good, Marilyn, aren't you? You're watching the mute on and off button. That's extraordinary. That's attention seeker. I was considering it, just something that popped into my mind, and I will share it. I bumped into this guy recently who I kind of thought vaguely I know on the streets, very young, maybe 18, and it just happened to cross over. He said, this is my last name. And I said, I know your dad. I know your dad. And his dad was someone who in this small town was considered right on the margins, the rough stuff in the rough stuff town, the guy who didn't make it. And after the earthquakes, he was the first person to say, what can I do? How can I help my community? And he stood for 3 days, pretty much day and night, on a water tanker and just opened and closed a valve and gave water to people. And the son, so this skipping forward, the son who I met said, my dad saved hundreds of people. He told them not to drink the water that had merc in it, this guy's on the street and he's, he's got trouble. And he was so proud of his dad.
Yeah.
And the story resonated. And I said, yeah, your dad made a difference, just like you will one day, or are, or, the ripples of kindness.
Mhm.
the repulsive actions that so largely go unnoticed is just extraordinary. So yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Okay, great. That's wonderful. And boy, we know how to use an hour, don't we?
We do.
And I think that, one of the things, well, and if you're still open, we will, have this meeting in another few weeks, not a few weeks, probably a month. Set it up, and if this remains a good time, then we'll just do it in a month's time.
Mhm.
But one thing that we wanted to ask your help with was to really help promote the gala that's coming up for us November 12th. And it's our one way of letting people know that the Charter of Compassion, what we're doing, but not necessarily what we're doing as much as really elevating the work of people who are exemplar in their areas. Last year, we gave out 10 awards. We found out that giving out 10 awards is like an enormous amount of work to put together a program. So this year, we have lessened it. We are giving awards to 3 humanitarians and 1 organization. In 2 weeks' time, in our newsletter, we will announce who the recipients of the humanitarian awards are. They're global, they're diversified. Each one of them are impactful to the global community, not just to their individual communities. And we're going to run a trivia contest in 2 weeks so that people can guess who the recipients are, and if they do guess, then they get a free ticket to the which is not a big deal, but to the gala itself. And so we have a gala page up, and we're adding to it every single day. But one of the things that we would like your help with is to promote the gala. If you're from a compassionate initiative that, and we don't care how much money you give, of course we do care, but what we want to do is let the world recognize that, Compassionate Christchurch is there, that your organizations are there, and we want to put up the logo so people around the world can see. And so that opportunity is available. But the other thing is that we've thought long and hard, and this is an experiment. Any nonprofit organization needs to find a way maybe towards stability, financial stability. So, we work with so many artists around the world, and we thought, geez, what would happen if we opened a gallery? And we ran it as a gallery. And it's a 50-50 venture with people, just like if they had, a gallery showing in Christchurch or in Nelson or in Auckland, that, their particular piece would gain 50% of the price for them and 50% for the gallery. And so we have it's our first global gallery. We're going to run it. It's going to open in October, and it's going to go through December. And if we find that it's been, fruitful, then we want to continue it. And it's an opportunity. We want to bring in more Indigenous art in particular. So if any of you in your communities know of young people, old people, any people who are artists and want to contribute, and Merida, maybe you can just, I know we're right at the
I
time.
can't because it's this Zoom.
Oh, okay. But if you go to that link, you'll click on the gallery, you'll see that we probably have
At the
maybe
top.
three dozen artists so far around the world, and we're looking at 3 pieces per artist. We're looking for cheaper art than some of the artists that are coming to us, but nonetheless, if whoever you might know, we'd really appreciate contact as soon as possible. So,
Wow.
Marilyn, we have to be in Georgia now.
okay, we have to go to Georgia. Bye, everyone.
How often have I said that?
Okay.
Lovely to see you. Thank you so much.
you.
It's a lovely.
See you. I'll
lots of
send you
lovely
the
people
recording
and all
sharing. I
these.
really
I hope to
appreciate
send you all these
everybody.
links.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice to see you.